For more on what we know about this Salmonella outbreak, I'd like to bring in Joseph McPhee. He's a professor of biomedical sciences at Toronto Metropolitan University. Joseph, I'm glad you could join us here on Global News.
Thank you very much for having me.
On top of these cantaloupes, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration is now recalling some granola bars and cereal from the Quaker Oats company, again because these products may be contaminated with salmonella. How does something like this happen? A salmonella outbreak for one, and then the fact that it's caused multiple deaths in our country.
Yeah, so it's a good question. We don't really know. Salmonella is a very common bacteria, but there are many different strains of Salmonella, and this most recent outbreak is actually caused by a fairly unusual strain of Salmonella, and we don't actually know much about how it causes disease. What we do know is that most of these products that are contaminated, they're agricultural products. They're grown in agricultural areas, and because of that, they can be contaminated with runoff containing bacteria due to local livestock or even local wildlife. And so that's how the salmonella gets into the food chain in the first place.
So is this different than, salmonella that we might be seeing in, say, poultry, for example? And how common is it in fruits?
Yeah, so you're right. Most people think when they think of salmonella, they do think of chicken as the main sort of route of acquiring that bacteria. But there have been a lot of recalls of fruit and vegetable due to either salmonella or in other cases due to E. coli or even listeria contamination. And so it's not that unusual to have recalls of fruit or fresh greens or sprouts. These are common foodstuffs that get recalled due to this contamination.
Okay, interesting. So if salmonella has the tendency to spread through contact, as we're kind of learning about this outbreak, how do we stop outbreaks and what signs do we look out for an infection?
Sure. So salmonella causes a disease called gastroenteritis, and this is acute vomiting, diarrhea. Most people will clear this infection without any real complication. And so the number of cases that we have, although I think there have been 153 cases reported, that's probably a gross underestimate of the number of cases that actually exist. Because in most cases of gastroenteritis, most people who have self-limiting infection or infection that doesn't progress to something really awful, they'll never report it, and the agencies don't count those. So most of the time, the number of cases is much higher than the number of cases that is actually reported. I guess in terms of how to protect yourself with things like cantaloupe, you can wash it under cold running water before cutting it. Most of the contamination in fruit like this is on the surface. And with cantaloupe, when you cut through the surface of that skin, the knife can actually bring the bacteria on the surface into the fruit itself. In the cantaloupe outbreak, although there's been a recall of whole fresh cantaloupe, there's also been recalls of a lot of cut fruit, the kind of fruit trays that you see in the grocery store. And those have been contaminated through this process of cutting through the skin and bringing the surface bacteria into the food that is consumed.
Okay, interesting. Professor Joseph McPhee joining us as we learn more about this Salmonella outbreak. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you very much.